I remember sitting in my car one night after a dinner party that left me feeling like I had been invisible in a room full of people who knew my name, but not my heart. They laughed over me, interrupted me, corrected my harmless stories. I smiled politely, like we're taught to do, but the truth is, I drove home with tears in my eyes, wondering if I was asking for too much just by wanting to feel respected. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've worked hard to be kind, to be understanding, to be generous, and yet you're met with condescension, mockery, or silence. You start to question yourself. Is it me? Am I being too sensitive? Let's pause there. This conversation is not about blame or bitterness. It's about reclaiming something we're all worthy of: dignity. And today, I want to gently walk you through 5 ways to handle people who don't respect you, not with anger, but with courage and compassion for yourself. The first thing we need to talk about, and I mean really talk about, heart to heart, is this heavy, aching tendency we have to internalize other people's behavior. How we quietly carry the weight of someone else's disrespect and let it morph into self-doubt. It's subtle, like smoke under a door. Before you know it, it's filled the whole room, clouding your sense of worth. You see, when someone dismisses you, mocks your opinion, talks over you, or treats you like your time or presence doesn't matter, it stings in a place deeper than logic. It stings in the space where your value lives. That quiet, unspoken part of you that just wants to be seen and known and treated with care. And when it happens often enough, something dangerous can start to take root. The belief that maybe you deserve it. That maybe if you were more successful, more assertive, more something, you'd be treated better. But let's get one thing clear. Someone else's inability to respect you says absolutely nothing about your worth. People see you through their own lens, through their own fears, biases, insecurities, traumas, and sometimes those lenses are dirty. Sometimes they're cracked. And if you're not careful, you'll start to mistake their distorted reflection of you as truth. There was a time when I kept bending myself into shapes I thought other people would admire. I made myself small to make others comfortable. I laughed off disrespect, played it cool, acted like it didn't bother me, because I thought that was strength. I thought that was what I was meant for. But I think that because I thought that was strength, but it wasn't strength, it was survival. And survival has its place, especially when we're younger, when we don't have the tools or the safety to speak up. But we're not meant to live in survival mode forever. At some point, we have to say, I am no longer carrying the burden of someone else's brokenness. You are not a mirror for their projections. You are not here to be the emotional punching bag, the convenient scapegoat, or the background character in their drama. You are worthy of respect because you are human, not because of what you do, how perfect you act, or how much you give, just because you are. And if no one has told you that in a while, let me say it right now. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not hard to love. You're just someone who's ready to stop blaming yourself for other people's choices. That clarity, that deep grounded knowing that you are not the problem, is what sets the stage for everything else. It's not about ego. It's about reclaiming your right to exist without apology, your right to take up space, speak truth, and be treated with basic dignity. Because the moment you stop confusing their disrespect with your value is the moment you begin to walk differently in the world. There comes a time, maybe after the 100th time someone talks down to you, dismisses your needs, or pushes past your boundaries, when you realize something's got to change. And not in them, in you. Not because you're the problem, but because your peace, your emotional safety, your well-being, they're being held hostage by the idea that you have to stay agreeable to be accepted. And that's just not true. You see, when someone doesn't respect you, it's easy to start doubting whether you even deserve to protect yourself. But hear me, setting a boundary isn't an act of war, it's an act of self-love. Boundaries aren't walls to shut people out, they're doors with locks, built to protect the sacred parts of you, the parts that have been bruised, ignored, talked over, or misunderstood for too long. When I first started learning about boundaries, I thought they had to be loud, angry, a dramatic exit, choosing not to engage in the same pattern again. Silence, not as punishment, but as a way to return to your own center. And yes, it can feel uncomfortable. Especially if you've spent a lifetime being the peacemaker. If you were raised to be polite above all else. If you were taught that being liked is more important than being respected. But let me tell you something powerful I learned the hard way. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You can't keep over-explaining, overextending, over-accommodating, hoping they'll finally see your worth when what you really need is to see it yourself. Setting a boundary might look like saying, "Please don't speak to me that way." Or, "I'm not available for this kind of dynamic anymore." It might mean you stop showing up where you're constantly disrespected, even if it's awkward, even if people don't understand. Because your healing is not a group project. It's personal, it's sacred. And here's the beautiful, tender truth. Every time you set a boundary, you teach your nervous system something new. You tell yourself, "We are safe now." You whisper to your younger self, "We don't have to stay where we aren't honored." You show your heart that it deserves to be protected, not just loved, but respected. You won't always get it perfect. That's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about practice. A daily practice of showing up for yourself with truth and tenderness, of learning to speak the words that tremble on your tongue, of building a life where your worth is non-negotiable. Because at the end of the day, boundaries aren't just about keeping disrespect out. They're about creating enough space for you to breathe, grow, and finally feel what it's like to be free from constant emotional harm. And you deserve that. You've always deserved that. One of the most draining, most soul-depleting things you can do is keep trying to explain yourself to people who are determined not to understand you. And I say determined with intention, because some people aren't confused about you. They've already made up their mind. You could bring every truth you hold polished and tender and spoken from the most vulnerable place in you, and still they'd roll their eyes, interrupt, twist your words, or brush your pain aside with a smirk or a shrug. And maybe you've been there, heart wide open, trying to build a bridge, only to find the other person setting fire to every plank as you speak. That kind of emotional labor is exhausting. It leaves you questioning not just the relationship, but yourself. You start asking, am I the problem? Did I say too much? Should I have stayed quiet? But what if I told you the issue isn't what you said? It's that you were talking to someone who never intended to listen. There are people who will weaponize your vulnerability, people who use sarcasm, passive aggression, or coldness, not because you deserve it, but because it protects them from ever having to grow. There are people who use sarcasm, passive aggression, or coldness, not because you deserve it, but because it protects them from ever having to grow. But this is easier said than done. People who use sarcasm, passive aggression, or coldness are people who use it, by the way. And the more you plead for them to meet you with respect, the more power you hand them over your peace. It's like yelling into a canyon and waiting for something more than an echo. But that echo will never hug you back. It will never say, "I see you. I hear you. Let's fix this." And maybe the hardest truth to face is this. Sometimes you have to stop speaking just so you can start healing. You don't need to keep performing emotional CPR on relationships that flatlined a long time ago. You don't need to keep breaking yourself open, hoping that this time they'll finally respond with care. And you certainly don't need to keep proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it. There's a quiet kind of power in walking away from a conversation that's only ever been one-sided. It's the kind of power that says, "I'm done begging you to meet me at eye level when you keep looking down on me." It's not about winning. It's not about revenge. It's about knowing that your energy is precious, and not everyone gets unlimited access to it. Some people only understand distance. And sometimes that distance is the boundary your soul has been asking for. I remember once trying to explain to someone that their words were hurtful, not in a dramatic way, just honestly, and they laughed. Just Not right away, but eventually. Because the moment I stopped trying to be understood by the wrong people was the moment I began to understand myself more clearly. I began to realize that I didn't need their validation to feel whole. So if you're in that place, if you're tired, if your voice is hoarse from trying to make someone see you, maybe it's time to rest. Maybe it's time to redirect that energy toward people who do listen, who do honor you. Or maybe even just toward yourself, because your story matters. Your feelings matter, and they shouldn't have to be shouted to be heard. You were never meant to twist yourself into someone else's version of acceptable just to earn the basic decency of respect. You don't need to be louder. You need to be loved right. And that starts with you choosing to protect your peace, even if it means walking away from the noise. There's something I want to tell you, and I want you to hear it, not just with your mind, but with the part of you that's been bruised from years of being too hard on yourself. Sometimes the real reason we allow disrespect to stay in our lives isn't because we don't see it. It's because deep down, we've started to believe we deserve it. And I say that with all the tenderness in the world. Not to shame you, but to hold a mirror to something so many of us are afraid to name. If you grew up in a space where love had conditions, where being good meant being silent, where your needs were too often met with disapproval or dismissal, then you may have learned that your value is tied to how much you can endure. And so when someone disrespects you now, there's this inner voice, quiet but relentless, that whispers, "This is familiar. Maybe this is normal. Maybe I can handle it. Maybe this is normal. Maybe I can handle it. This is familiar. Maybe this is normal. Maybe I can handle it. Maybe I should." But that voice, that's not your truth. That's your past speaking. That's old wiring. That's emotional scar tissue, pretending to be intuition. And if you're going to reclaim your worth, your peace, your voice, you have to start replacing that voice with one that knows how to be kind to you. This is where self-compassion comes in. Not the fluffy kind that says, just take a bubble bath and everything will be okay. I'm talking about the fierce, radical kind of self-compassion that sits with you in the dark, that holds your hand and says, I know you've been through a lot. I know you've been taught to minimize your pain, to laugh off the hurt, to be the strong one, but I'm not going to let you carry this alone anymore. I see you, I love you, and I will not abandon you. Because here's the truth that changes everything. You can't demand respect from others if you haven't learned to give it to yourself first. And giving it to yourself doesn't mean being perfect. It means being gentle. It means forgiving yourself for the years you stayed silent. It means letting go of the shame that tells you, I should have known better, and replacing it with the truth. You did the best you could with what you had. And now you're learning to do better. That matters. Self-compassion is standing in front of the mirror and seeing more than your flaws. It's choosing to speak to yourself with the same softness you'd offer a hurting child. It's noticing when the inner critic starts to rise, when it says, you're overreacting, or you're making a big deal out of nothing. And instead saying, no, my feelings are valid, my experiences matter. I don't have to gaslight myself just because others have. And let's be real, it's not always easy. Sometimes it feels awkward. Sometimes it feels fake at first. But over time, self-compassion builds something that's hard to shake. Trust. Trust in your own voice. Trust in your boundaries. Trust in your ability to walk away from disrespect, not because you're angry, but because you're healed. You are not a sponge for other people's pain. You are not a container for their chaos. You don't exist to be endlessly understanding while they remain endlessly unkind. You are allowed to outgrow dynamics that taught you to abandon yourself. You are allowed to say, I love you, but I love me more. And maybe You're learning that loving yourself doesn't mean you become cold or detached. It means you stop settling for crumbs when you were made for a feast. That's what self-compassion does. It softens what's been hardened in you. It returns you to yourself, piece by precious piece. It teaches you to stay not with those who hurt you, but with yourself, in the mess, in the healing, in the choosing of a better way. So if you've been waiting for permission to treat yourself like someone worthy of care and respect, let this be it. You are worthy. Not someday, not when you've fixed all your flaws, now. There's a moment, often quiet, sometimes painful, always powerful, when you realize that the most respectful, loving thing you can do for yourself is let go. Letting go doesn't always mean slamming doors or making grand announcements. Sometimes it's simply choosing to stop showing up where you're not honored. It's quietly stepping back from conversations that leave you feeling small. It's answering your own soul when it asks, why are we still here? But letting go is hard, isn't it? Because maybe you've invested years into someone who continually dismisses your needs. Maybe you've tried to be understanding, to stay patient, to give benefit after benefit of the doubt. You've tried to see their side. You've excused the tone, the sarcasm, the coldness, hoping it would pass, hoping that if you just held on long enough, they'd finally rise to meet you where you are. And yet, here you are, tired, aching, emotionally threadbare, realizing you've built a bridge and they've never even taken a step toward it. I want you to know something that took me years to understand. Letting go is not failure. It's not weakness, and it's not giving up. Letting go is love, just pointed in a new direction. Is the kind of love that says, I will no longer betray myself in the name of loyalty to someone who won't grow with me. It's the kind of love that says, I've cried enough, I've tried enough, and now I choose peace. There's bravery in that choice, tremendous, quiet bravery. Because walking away from disrespect doesn't just require courage, it requires grief. You grieve not just the relationship or the role that person played in your life, but the hope you once held, the hope that things would change, that they'd see you, value you, finally meet you with the love you deserve. But sometimes the most faithful thing you can do for your heart, for your future, for your self-worth, is close the chapter with your head held high and say, this is not where I will find the respect I deserve, and I will no longer keep myself small just to keep someone else comfortable. And I will no longer keep myself small just to keep someone else comfortable. Letting go might look like fewer replies, more space, a shift in your energy, a new boundary, or maybe just a quiet inner knowing, I choose me now. What grows with you? What feels safe? But most importantly, you begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone hard to love or too sensitive or overly emotional, but as someone who finally decided to stop waiting for others to catch up to their value. You become the kind of person who looks in the mirror and says, I may have stayed too long before, I may have tolerated what I shouldn't have, but I'm not ashamed of that. I was doing the best I could with what I knew, and now I know better. Now I choose differently. And that, dear soul, is freedom. Not the loud, performative kind, but the deep, internal kind. The kind that reshapes your story. The kind that makes room for joy again. So if you're standing at that edge, if you're wondering whether it's okay to let go, to walk away, to reclaim your dignity, I want to say this as clearly as I can. Yes, it's okay. Yes, it's time. Yes, you are strong enough. You're not letting go because you're bitter. You're letting go because your spirit is finally remembering what it feels like to be whole, and it's ready to come home. We begin again with tenderness. We began again with tenderness. We began again with tenderness. We began again with tenderness. It's impossible to be tender about someone you love and tender about the same, with bravery, with the kind of small, quiet choices that build a life of self-worth. You're not here to fix other people's behavior. You're here to grow roots so deep that the storm doesn't shake you. To handle people who don't respect you is not to fight them. It's to return to yourself, again and again and again. So today, just take one step. Speak up. Say no. Set the boundary. Choose silence over self-explanation. Or maybe just sit with your hand on your heart and whisper, I matter. I am allowed. I am enough. You've always been enough. Let's start living like it. Thank you for being here. If this message touched you, let it ripple. Share it, subscribe, comment your truth. Let someone else know they're not alone in this. We rise, one courageous voice at a time.